G'day everyone and welcome to this special Magnus Energy webinar. Today we're discussing Magnus's Nachu graphite project. We have with us David Taylor, who is the new CEO. He was appointed in May this year. Now, if you don't know David has 30 years of international experience leading the strategic development and growth of organisations across the property, construction, transport, renewables, energy, environmental and social infrastructure sectors. He has previously held senior leadership roles with ASX-listed firms including Worley, Bingo Industries, WS Limited and Transurban Limited. Now, we've got time for Q&A, so the format today is a 15-minute presentation by David, and then we'll open up the forum for questions. David, thanks for your time. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time today to listen to us bring you this BFS update on the Nachu graphite project. I'd like to kick off today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet today and recognise their continuing connection to land and waters. Pay my respect to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people who are joining us here today. Just moving through the slides onto slide one, I just wanted to give a quick update. I've recently returned from Tanzania, where I've spent a couple of weeks meeting all of our team out on site and really walking the site, doing all of the travelling that all of our vehicles are going to have to do when we construct this project. Fascinating country, people are wonderful, culture is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to working with the teams locally, working with all of the stakeholders in Tanzania to really push this project forward. So yeah, very exciting. Today is really to talk to you through the BFS update, which we released to the market in late September, and highlight some of the key aspects of this very exciting project. So just the value drivers of Nachu kicking off, and what makes Nachu very different. A very strong financial, obviously strong cash flows driven by good operating margins with an NPV of 1.2 billion in US dollars and a strong internal rate of return. So very attractive project returns. The key differentiator for us is really the quality of the graphite. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we work through today's presentation, but that really is one of the key significant differentiators of this particular project. In terms of the product that comes from this particular project, over 40% is in the high value jumbo and super jumbo, for coarse flake for specialized industrial markets, attracting some premium prices. And one of the key things that makes a key differentiator of this project is the special economic license, which we hold in relation to the production of those materials. Moving on to the next slide, really focusing on the demand and supply dynamics. And what I've got here, and these are some figures from Benchmark Minerals around what the forecast for the market in graphite actually really looks like going forward. And I think we've all seen the incredible price rises in the market on the lithium side, particularly of the lithium-ion battery market. But I think people are now starting to realize that graphite being nearly 50% of the content of a lithium-ion battery, there are significant supply shortages being forecast in the market out to 2040. And these graphs here really do paint that picture very clearly. 2040, a forecast deficit of 8 million tonnes per annum. And of course, we believe that the supply that is currently in the market and forecast to come into the market really does create a massive gap, and that creates some very positive outlooks from a pricing perspective going forward. So we're really excited about where the market is going in the future, and we believe that we're very well positioned to be bringing our actual project into the market at a time when prices are hopefully increasing. Moving on to the next slide, really does talk about the Nachu graphite project and where it is. So it's located south of Dar es Salaam in the southern region, the Lindi region of Tanzania, about 220 kilometers by road from the Mtwara port. And this particular project has been under development for about 10 years. So About 2012 was when the initial discovery was made, and then a lot of work has been put into place developing up that mine to where it is today. It's certainly one of the largest mineral resources of flake graphite in the world. We'll obviously talk a little bit more about that and the resources side of things. But what we've got at the moment is that the project covers around about 30 square kilometres in area, and there's sufficient resource there for a very large project. On the next slide, just talking a little bit more about the entities and the permits that we have in place. We have two different entities, and one is Urinex, which is the original developer. And Urinex company will actually carry out the mine and extraction and the mining operations under the special mining license. That special mining license was granted back in 2015, and that includes paying a mineral royalty of 3%. And also includes the changes that were made to the legislation to provide 16% of that particular entity to the Tanzanian government, so that they participate and in the benefits of the resource development, and then that can be used for future development of the Tanzanian economy. On the processing side, we applied for a special economic zone, and that was really to all the discussions that we went through to achieve that special economic zone. One of the only mining projects in Tanzania to achieve this, and that really is where a lot of the processing will be done of the ore. So two separate companies which all roll up under Magnus perspective. The key thing about the special economic zone is that we actually have a 10-year period where we'll be exempt from corporate tax and royalties and dividends and interest for 10 years. So that's a key value driver for this particular project. We also have some other key things in there which are very attractive to investors and also financiers, which is that revenues are to be paid into offshore accounts, not local accounts. And there is international arbitration available if there is any dispute resolution. So that from an international investor perspective, this is critical from their perspective aspect of how we've structured the project so far. Moving on to the next slide, really does focus on the project itself and talks a little bit more about the different blocks that we have on the under the special mining license. Over 85% of the mineral resource is actually very shallow in mining terms. So less than 150 meters from the surface and no greater than 250 meters maximum depth. That obviously reduces our mining cost and so on and so on, but a lot of the resources is within very shallow areas. The main focus of the development and the main focus of the feasibility study update are our two open pits, Block F and Block FS. And with Block F being the major deposit. Both of those, certainly Block F is the largest deposit, and it's really good flake quality, which is why the development has been focused on that particular area. The actual geology, graphitic schist with later stage dolomite intrusives. If I was a geologist, I'd be able to explain that, but I'm not a geologist, so I won't try and explain that. But what I have learnt since joining the company and talking with our geologists and metallurgists is the unique characteristics of our graphite flakes is that the impurities that are typical within graphite flakes are actually on the surface of the flake and not within the crystalline structure, and that creates a real advantage when it comes to purifying the graphite to be used in lots of different uses. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. On the next slide, really talking about the resources and reserves that are contained within those blocks. So overall, we have total mineral resources of 174 million tonnes, and that is at a 5.4% grade. That ends up resulting in 9.3 million tonnes in total of contained graphite with a potential mine life of 40 years. We've got 71% of that is measured and indicated, and we've only really looked at a very, very small area of the current prospecting license, which sits outside the broader special mining license area. From an ore reserves perspective, just F and FS block obviously have 76 million tonnes of proved and probable resources for 3.7 million tonnes of graphite generated from year 2 to 12 at a 5.2% grade. That particular gives us a mine life of around 15.5 years with some real significant upside going forward to expand the facility over time. On the next slide, really just focusing on the process and the metallurgical validation, which we've been through. And yesterday, in fact, I had the opportunity, earlier this week, sorry, I had the opportunity to attend the metallurgical lab, which has done all of our testing and really review the whole process of how we've come up with all and tested the results and validated the metallurgical process. So really, starting with the rod milling, the crushing, of course, and then the rod milling, going through the flotation process, the concentrating the process, floating that, and then drying that, and then obviously the subsequent stages to come up with the actual end result in the 3 different grades that we have, the 3 different sizes. So really interesting and exciting is how they've actually done all that. What we've actually built into the process side in the plant is a front-end throughput of 5 million tonnes of ore per annum with a feed grade of an average of 5.2% for the first 12 years and then 3.9% over the next 3 years as we get into the lower grade ores within the actual ore body. The final average concentrate purity is sitting at 98.8%, which is relatively high when you're looking at the different types of, or the different mines that are actually in East Africa and in the Tanzanian region. What we've been able to really focus on from a testing perspective is it's greater than 99% purity just from that basic flotation for the sub 300 microns. And that's really important when it comes down to providing in particular the battery materials market. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the moment. But very high purity results, and the purity side of things and the crystal structure with the, as I mentioned before, with the impurities sitting on the surface of the flakes makes this a very unique product in the market. On the next slide really focuses on the BFS update results itself, and we've just summarized here the results. Obviously, I've talked about an NPV of 1.2 billion with an IRR of project IRR of 51%. Really, the process that we went through, there was a 2016 bankable feasibility study completed. We engaged Asenco Services and various other parties to update that. And what that really did confirm was that we have a very technical and financially viable project with some great sustainability attributes as well. The basis of the feasibility study, as I mentioned, 5 million tonnes per annum of ore, 236,000 tonnes of high purity graphite concentrate produced over years 2 to 12 with a 15.5-year mine life. So I'll talk a little bit more about the capital and the operating costs on the next slide, which kind of really talks through all the different aspects of that. So on the capital side, really breaks down into the process plant being the major component of the capital at 174 million. The physical infrastructure, which supports all of that, at 83 million. The indirect costs of 23 million, and then project delivery and contingencies and some other costs to come up with a 364 million capital cost. On the operating cost side, is $639 per tonne cash cost, which is the free on board cost at Mutwara once we're in steady state production. And the key thing that we've done in this particular update to the BFS is looked very closely at the power generation costs and the carbon footprint, and the number of options which were considered within that particular feasibility study update. We ended up at a position where we believe that using gas-fired power generation across a number of high-speed gas-fired power units was not only the most economical, but also reduced the carbon footprint significantly from diesel-fired power generation. Our strategy from a mining perspective is to use contract miners, and that's been priced into the actual mining cost there. And of course, we've got the product logistics, moving the product from the site down to Imtwara port. The following slide is talking about the purity and the flake size, and this is really, I believe, one of the key differentiators of this whole project, and the types of flakes that we're actually producing and coming from this fantastic resource really does differentiate this whole project. And it comes down to the very high levels of purity, and well in excess of on 99% for the sub 300 micron, with very little, any sort of chemical treatment and things like that. Now, taking that to the next stage and creating a battery grade material, because of the flakes purity and because of the actual flake structure, that reduces significantly the cost that we will need to treat that particular flake, to purify it from non-chemical and non-heat resources to be used in battery anodes and expanded graphite materials. So that's a fantastic opportunity for us, but also we do have a significant amount of 40% of the product being in those higher value super jumbo and jumbo flake sizes as well, and we're working very hard on some of the offtakes for those particular products. On the next slide, the really focuses on the environmentally and social side of things. So as I mentioned just briefly, the high purity natural flake graphite eliminates, when we get further down into the processing, eliminates harsh chemical treatments and eliminates the thermal treatment, so much lower energy requirement and a lot safer process as well. So that's one of the key things. The resettlement program, I had the opportunity to go and visit the current eco village, which we're finalizing at the moment. It's almost finished, and it was great to walk around that site and to see the new village in place with the range of different accommodation options that have been constructed, and the sustainability aspects of that particular program. Each of the houses having their own water tanks to capture water from the roof, and so water harvesting, very important, and a whole range of other different aspects at that particular site was really impressive to see. The environmental certificate, we certainly have, we've completed that to international standards, so the IFC requirements and the Equator Principles, so that process has been completed, and that we've really hang our hats on the achievements that we've got in particular from an environmental perspective. Community engagement, we have a large community engagement program that has been implemented for some time now, really working with the community on a whole range of different aspects to not only provide a better housing and infrastructure for the community, but also to promote education and learning opportunities, health programs, and we're certainly looking to further those programs going forward in the future. Local employment is going to be really important to us. Certainly training programs that we're going to be looking to put in place to benefit the local community in Ruangwa and the more broader community of Tanzania is going to be a really important part of it as we go through not only the delivery side of things, but also into the operational phase as well. And the tailings design, very, very importantly, will be completed to international standards by internationally acclaimed consultants in this particular area. There's, it's not a, the tailings is a very important part for us to deal with, but there's no harsh, it's very benign, the tailing side of things. So, but we still have to, of course, develop and design that particular tailings design to make sure that it meets all the international standards and practices for dealing with those tailings. On the next slide, we really talk about the graphite product markets and focus on we've got a secured offtake with Traxys Europe for the 600,000 tonnes of graphite concentrate for the first 6 years. That starts at 50,000 tonnes for the first year and goes up to $110,000. And that's across all of the different product sizes which we have. So the super jumbo, the jumbo, and then the large, medium, and fine. We do believe that the large, medium, and fine, the 60% there, 59%, sorry, is very, very targeted at the lithium-ion battery market. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. but certainly the remainder in the super jumbo and the jumbo in the refractories, manufactured fluids, cast electrodes, and those other key markets are really important as well. And we're continuing our discussions with customers in those particular areas to really underpin the project going forward. On the next slide, we focus on the infrastructure and logistics, and this is one of the key things which was a key takeaway from me from my visit was looking at the different aspects of the infrastructure. So I went down and visited the port, saw the infrastructure that's actually being built there. One of the things I did see was a construction of a new loader, which is going to be very beneficial for us when we actually ultimately move our product down from site to the actual port and then load it onto export vessels. So great to see the actual port, great to see the land available around the port for us to have warehousing facilities, and then obviously see all the roads and infrastructure which lead from our site down to the port. It's about 200 kilometers by road. It talks about that will be sealed by the time production commences. Certainly driving up there, the major road, once you get off the sealed section that goes from one of the villages all the way up to Wurrungwa, very well advanced in terms of construction. The majority of the roads are formed. A large section of the road was having the final base course being laid and actually getting ready for sealing. So that road is now very well advanced. And I expect that sort of in the next 12 to 18 months, that road will be certainly up and running. So and then obviously we've also been talking to the local authorities about just ensuring that the roads from Wurrungwa out to the site itself are also in sufficient condition and standard to move the construction materials and construction equipment into the site. So that's really exciting. Water availability, we've got bore fields currently on site, and there's a whole water management system, including freshwater dams and a whole infrastructure system for moving water around the site, which we'll need for the process. I've already talked about the power. It's great that we've actually looked at this natural gas-fired power station. We're currently finalising a feasibility study for the pipeline to actually run from the main pipeline and connect across to the actual physical site. So that's all in progress at the moment as well. Probably moving on to the next slide and really talking about the upcoming milestones. Obviously, we're going to continue the discussions that we're having with further offtake agreements, and that's with a range of customers, both on the lithium-ion battery, the anode battery material side of things, and also in those other markets that I mentioned previously. So that will continue on from now until roughly into the midway through the next year. We're working on appointing our advisory team for the financing side. We have appointed our legal advisor, and we're finalising our financial advisor over the next few weeks. That will then move into the process of preparing debt financing information for banks. I've had a number of discussions with a whole range of different banks in relation to this particular project. All of them have expressed a lot of interest in participating in this project. As I mentioned, the SEZ being one of the key aspects of that going forward. So most of next year, most of the first half of next year, we'll be going through negotiating that debt financing and working with all of those different parties. Those will include a combination of commercial banks, development finance institutions, and also export credit agencies as well. That's our view at this point in that time. We do have to submit a further update of the environmental and social impact assessment for the SEZ area. That's almost complete and about to be lodged. Then there'll be an approval process to go through that. We've engaged Ausenco recently to commence the construction optimization study, which will really look at some of the more logistical aspects and seeing where we can really look for opportunities to refine that capital cost and improve on that capital cost. So that will be ongoing to the end of this year, and then looking to move into the feed process and commencing contract negotiations on the delivery side in parallel with the financing process above. The resettlement program is due to be complete by the end of this year, as I mentioned earlier. So that's looking really positive. Working ourselves all the way to a final investment decision and financial close by the middle of next year, and then moving into the EPCM phase after that. So that's really where we're heading over the next 6 to 9 months. Probably about it for me. Just wrapping up on the final slide is really just reinforcing some of the key highlights of the particular project. I've talked a lot about the premium grade graphite and the quality of the graphite. The compelling project economics are really exciting. The strong project viability from a technical capacity, certainly the infrastructure well and truly in place to support the project. Permitting and licensing, all in place. Only special economic zone granted because of the export focus, and then the environmentally and socially responsible aspects of things. And sustainability really is the core, one of the core things that we're focused on about delivering this project to the highest international standards.
Thanks, David. A very thorough presentation there. We have lots of questions. One of the first questions is in regards to the Special Economic Zone license. It's a 10-year license. When did that start and when does it expire?
I think it started a few years ago now, and we're working towards renewing that particular Special Economic Zone for a further 10 years. So at the moment, I'll have to come back and just clarify the exact date of when that expires, but I'm happy to come back on that particular question.
Yeah, Paul asked that question, so if we can follow up offline, we can do that. Also, an obvious question is IM3 New York's in production. Where is it getting its graphite from currently?
It's currently getting its graphite from a international supplier, a non-Chinese international supplier. And so that's coming out, it's coming out of Asia, but it's not China. So they've got an existing agreement with that particular supplier. IM3 in New York utilizes the services of C4V in terms of qualifying suppliers, but we're certainly obviously looking forward to supplying that plant with our graphite ultimately as well.
Is there any idea of what percentage of that supply will go to IM3 New York?
Look, if you look at the actual requirement if you look at the 2030 size of what IM3 New York is looking at in terms of 38 gigawatt hours, then that would look, if we were to supply 100% of that particular requirement, then that would be about 30 to 35,000 tons of graphite that they'd be looking for on an annual basis. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what their kind of overall demand would be. And I think obviously we'd be looking to supply that with them, but yeah.
Other sources as well. And you also say that Nachu graphite is high quality with low impurities.
Yes.
Does that mean you'll get better pricing? And there's a question here in regards, does that help with financing?
It certainly does. We believe that we've got a premium product in the market, and we believe that that should attract, particularly from a sustainability perspective. Certainly a lot of discussions we're having with off-takers are very, very, they're putting in agreements, for instance, that the sustainability side of the supply of that particular product is very, very important to them, and there's audit requirements and a whole range of different things. So we believe that places us in a really strong position for supplying those markets that are looking for those non-Chinese and sustainable products.
And what sort of feedback are you getting from your graphite concentrate, and what sort of feedback are you getting from the market?
Look, they're very, very interested in the quality of the particular product that we're looking to produce. So they're asking for samples of the product that they can test. But certainly, the feedback that we've got so far from people who've been testing our particular product is that it is very unique compared to others, and very high quality. So that's really positive from our perspective.
And of course, your development time line is reasonably aggressive, with feed expected to complete in the first half of 23 and production to start in 2025. You recently visited Tanzania. Can you provide some insights into how this is progressing?
Yeah, look, I think we've been, certainly in discussions with a lot of people for a lot of time, and we've got a lot of the actual things in place which allow us to move quite quickly, which is why we have an aggressive timeline there, and in particular from the financing side of things. So a lot of things we've got in place, the permits, some good. If you look in the detail of the feasibility study, we've got a lot of actual market-related information on pricing and so on and so on. So that's why we're confident that those timelines that we put in there are quite achievable. When I look at the actual, being in Tanzania, seeing the actual, the port, 1 million tons capacity. They're finalising the construction of the loader at the moment, and it looked like it was, certainly very close to completion. And the road itself, certainly, as I mentioned, a large section was final base course level and heading towards ceiling, with some other sections all formed and ready for those final courses. So I think that's is going to be, that's going to be well and truly ready from an infrastructure perspective as well.
And you mentioned natural gas. There's a question here: how secure is the supply of that natural gas for the project?
So we're in discussions with the gas supply company at the moment. They've certainly given us indications that they can meet our timeframes to supply that gas. So we're working on a gas supply agreement with them at the moment, and that all indications from them at the moment is that gas will be available when we require it in early 2025.
And of course, just to Traxys, you've signed Traxys Europe. You signed an agreement for 600,000 tonnes of graphite concentrate over 6 years. Yep. There's a question here noting that the company has already missed sunset dates that needs to be extended to 2023. Yep. Can you provide a program update on the 3 remaining identified conditions?
Look, the actual 3 conditions that are within that agreement, they were all adjusted in line with the actual movement of that particular sunset date. So we're working towards achieving all of those milestones in line with those particular adjustments as well.
And has there been any more? Can we have some more colour around any other offtake discussions that have been taking place?
Look, we've had a number of different discussions with all range of different organisations, right from tier 1 global auto manufacturers to major producers of various graphite products. In Japan, for instance, there's been a number of different discussions ongoing in relation to offtakes of those particular graphite products that they're looking for as well. So a whole range of different discussions ongoing at the moment across a broad range of different customers.
And you also recently announced plans to enter the battery anode market in the US.
Yeah.
What are the advantages of producing anode materials in the US, and why the US?
Look, I think when you look at the supply deficit, I think I saw something this morning that mentioned a 50% supply deficit of anode materials in the US, just for the US battery market coming up. So certainly from a market perspective and a supply demand, we see a fantastic opportunity in the US to supply that market. I think the other attractive side of building a plant in the US, of course, is really the incentive programs that the US government has been putting in place, either through the Inflation Reduction Act or through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the funding support which is actually being made available to some of our competitors, for instance. We believe there's a fantastic opportunity for us to develop a project that produces a lower cost, environmentally friendly product in the particular market to really meet that supply gap and diversify that supply chain away and achieve the objectives of what the US government is trying to achieve from a local supply chain for the electric vehicle industry.
I mean, that said, your graphite comes from Tanzania. How does that reconcile with the strict requirements around kind of a US-based supply chain?
Look, I think that's not too much of an issue from our perspective, and certainly the discussions we've had with people, that are looking at these types of issues. They're much more focused on, producing locally produced anode materials and focused on that. Having said that, we're also looking at producing some of the battery anode material in Tanzania as well. So it's not only just a US-based focus, but it's also a Tanzanian-based focus as well.
And you mentioned funding. You touched on funding. How's your liquidity position? What are your funding options, given you also have to fund the further development of IM3 New York?
Look, so in terms of the funding side of things, on the Nachu side of things, we're obviously looking at talking to a number of different financial institutions from a debt financing perspective. So, we'll be looking very closely at that. In terms of IM3 New York, we're looking at a number of different funding options. Clearly, we have an application into the Department of Energy for under their loan programs, and that's a very large component of the funding going forward of that particular. And we're also looking at a range of different funding options for the further development of IM3 New York. And of course, the active anode materials plant is obviously another thing that we're focused on how we're funding. Really focused on offtake agreements, because that really is the catalyst for us to explore further those funding options.
Great, David. I think we've covered all the questions today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation. And thanks for the audience for being online. Really informative. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, David. See you later.
See you, Tim.